right. Well, welcome everyone to Let's Talk Wellness in partnership with the Change to Chill program. Is session 3, and I'm Stacy Bessinen, and I'm a community wellness coordinator. And today's topic is let's have some self-compassion. So when we talk about self-compassion, it can be kind of a tough thing as it relates to, self-care and, how we're feeling about just kind of that taboo of self-care. So when we talk about self-compassion, it really is that compassion that we allow and give to others, but it's simply compassion directed inwards to ourselves. And that can be a really, really tough thing to do. And we'll talk about that today. So the objectives today are just to understand self-compassion, what it is, how it can help us, and really reflect on what we do, not only our internal thoughts, but just our overall self-care, and to understand that. And then how to be more self-compassionate to your own being and what that means. And then we'll do a little bit of practice. Okay, so last time and the first time we talked a little bit about values. So kind of, hopefully if you weren't able to do that, you maybe in the next couple of days, you'll be able to find out what your top values in life are, because it can help lead you to many different things. So once you find those top values, it'll help transcend your life. So it can help you make any and all decisions that you make. It can really be your light and your strength as it relates to even self-compassion. And then it can also dictate how you respond in any situation. And we've talked a lot about stress, in that how stress affects us, and everyone is going to be stressed. We are going to have stress in our life. That's part of being human. But at the same time, we also have the ability to take that space between the stressor and how we respond to it. And in that space, we can kind of take a step back and reflect on the whole situation. And then oftentimes we know that response can actually cause more pain than the stressor itself. So what I want you to do, if you have a piece of paper next to you, I want you to write down the most critical statement that you say to yourself most often. If you don't have a piece of paper, that's fine. Just kind of really reflect on that and think about it. What is that statement of criticism? We tend to be our own worst critic. What is that critical statement that in the back of your mind, if you do something wrong or something happens that you say, you're like, oh, and then you might roll your eyes, and what is that statement? And write that down, or just reflect on that. And as you're reflecting on that, think of it in terms of how that makes you feel, and when you say it and how you say it. And now what I want you to do is think of your favorite person in the world. And I want you to imagine that you're looking your favorite person in the world right in the eye. And with all of your intention, I want you to imagine yourself saying that to that person. Was that easy to do? Was that hard? Could you do it? Oftentimes when I'm with a group of people like this, what I'll have them do is write this down and then turn to their person sitting next to them and look them in the eye and say it. And there hasn't been one person who's been able to say that to another person that was sitting right by them. And so why is that? Why aren't we able to, or why would we not say that critical statement to someone else? Kind of reflect on that as well. And so oftentimes the reason is because we're so critical for ourselves. We say things to ourselves about ourselves that we would never say to anyone else. We're really our own worst critic. And so I love this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. So if somebody says something to you and you react and you feel it and you're really upset about it, giving somebody else that power to your feelings. So in the same case for yourself, what are your most critical statements that you say to yourself, and what power are you giving over those words? So we'll talk about that today. So the ultimate goal is to really have the courage to be yourself. And I really love this statement by Shel Silverstein. He said, "She had blue skin and so did he. He kept his hid and so did she. They searched for blue their whole life through, then passed right by and never knew." So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll just put this mask over our face, and because we think we need to be someone else, or we need to be this way or that way, and then we just wear these masks and never truly be the person who we are. So when we're more self-compassionate, we're able to kind of take off these layers and take off these masks and our be who we're meant to be. And then when we are who we are meant to be, then we end up finding our people, and we end up finding those who share our same passions and share our same purpose, and we find our people. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So when we take the mask off, we tend to dare greatly. So in all those areas of your values. So when we can reflect on this, oftentimes what happens is, I hear this a lot, like, I don't know where I belong. It's hard to meet people. It's hard to kind of get out there and find groups or find people to talk to. So what I say is start out with your passion. Start out with things that you really, really enjoy, and then just throw yourself into those with all your joy and all your might. Because when you're living your best life and living out your passions, that's where you'll find your people. You'll find others doing the same things that you enjoy. So if you enjoy hiking, if you enjoy knitting or crocheting or any of those habits, what will happen is you might join some class, you might take some classes or join some groups, and there your people are. So I really dare greatly to take off the mask and really reflect on doing those things that you enjoy. The next one is show up and be seen. Be yourself. Be yourself around those passions, those values that you set for yourself. Be very vulnerable by honoring those boundaries, and that can be a really, really hard thing to be vulnerable. And but the first step is to find those values, and once you find those values, then you can set some kind, loving boundaries around there. So I know I've mentioned before that my number one value is kindness. I want to be kind to people, and I want others to be kind to me. So if somebody isn't kind to me, I have those strong, loving boundaries that I can really uphold and do what I need to do to honor that value. And then share your story. But just remember that not everyone deserves to hear your story, only those who will really protect it. So, um, and that can be, pretty tough, but and can take a lot of work. So oftentimes we just hold this story inside of us, and sometimes it can kind of fester. But every human being on earth has a story. So it can be very, very powerful to share it with those right people. And then the last one is take care of yourself. How can we have the compassion and the self-compassion to find out those ways that we can take care of ourselves in the best way? So like I had mentioned before, those passions. So when we're trying to take care of ourselves and we're trying to be self-compassionate, and we find our values, that can lead to those passions. And so the definition is a strong feeling of enthusiasm or excitement for something or about doing something. And sometimes, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm passionate about. So here's some questions that you can reflect on. So what did you like to do when you were younger? And then what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were younger? So kind of reflecting on those things, because oftentimes as we get older, we have more responsibilities, and we just kind of get into this life that we're living, and we kind of forget about those things that we enjoyed doing, those things that we thought about a lot when we were younger, those things that we enjoyed doing. So kind of getting back to that and say, oh yeah, I really like to do this when I was younger, and then experiment a little bit and try it, and see if that leads you to your passion as we grow older. And then that purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, for which something exists. So, are you living out your purpose? And that can be really, really tough. We all have a purpose, and you do not need to know your purpose right now. uh, every single time that you go through a struggle in life, it will lead you closer to your purpose. And so we've often talked about managing stress and looking at stress in a different way. Like, what is your attitude towards stress? And when we look at stress as something positive, it is really when we look at stress as positive, because when something stresses you out and you have a reaction to it, it's telling you something about yourself, like what value was crossed. Um, how one thing can stress out one person, and then somebody else might not even be stressed about it. So kind of looking at that as, okay, what is this struggle trying to tell me, and what are my values around it? It can be very, very powerful and very, very healing. And so oftentimes I also hear people saying, I need to be perfect. Everything needs to be perfect. Nothing can go wrong. But just remember progress. We're just striving to be better than we were yesterday. And so I really like this quote: every day in every way, I'm getting better and better, right? Because we are. If we're taking that time to reflect on what's working for us and what's not, we're taking that time to look at our stressors and say, oh, yeah, I'm stressed about that because it's something I really care about, and it's crossing that value of mine. Then we're really learning about ourselves. We're really becoming our own student and teacher of ourselves. So in every way, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. And then here's an acronym called HAIL. And what that is, it's high aspirations, low expectations. And so oftentimes we can have really high expectations on ourselves or on others. And that can be really tough, especially when we have such high expectations on others. So we really want to direct that and turn it around and say, you know what, I am doing the best I can today with my stress and what today has brought. Um, I'm really aspiring to do the best I can, right? And that's all we can do. So some days you might have a lot of energy and you might be able to get everything done that you want. Some days you might have really low energy and you're trying to get things done and you're trying to push through that. But should you really push through that? Maybe not. Maybe it's a time for reflection and say, okay, today I don't have very much energy. I need a break, because knowing that if you take a little break or do something, some self-care, then you'll be able to have more energy to get back to all the things that you wanted to get done. And that's okay. So I learned this acronym from my husband, where he's so very forgiving, and he holds this acronym to a T. So if I have a day off from work and laundry needs to be done and the house is a mess, and he'll come home and I haven't done anything, I'm just sitting on the couch watching a movie, eating bonbons. He'll come in and he'll say, oh, it looks like you really needed a rest day. And I'll say, yeah, I did. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, can I help you with anything? Or I'm going to go put a load of laundry in the wash. And yeah. And so he knows that I aspire to do the best that I can today. And that's good. That's good. So not all of us are that forgiving, or not all of us are that reflective, and so it takes a lot of practice. But I love the hail because it also decreases your stress, because when you're looking at someone else, you're saying, oh, there's might be a lot of things going on in their life, so your expectations are met with kind of maybe more conversation and more communication. So high aspirations, low expectations. Okay, so self-care. Why does all that matter as it relates to that high aspirations, low expectations? And it does matter. So oftentimes, like I had mentioned before, you're like, I need to be perfect. I need to get all this stuff done. I need to do this, this, and that. And if you don't have the energy to do it, then how can we best care for ourselves? So what do you need in the moment? Maybe you need to take a nap. Maybe you need, fill in the blank. Everybody is really different. And so kind of living in that mindfulness moment. So living in that moment, it's the only one we have, this present moment. And a good example is that oxygen mask. When you're flying and the attendant comes up and says, okay, if something happens, an oxygen mask will fall in front of you, put the oxygen mask on you first. Because if you don't, what happens is you will pass out. If you try to help out somebody else before yourself, you'll pass out, and then when you're passed out, then they'll pass out, and then nobody gets help. So you put that oxygen mask on your first. You can help out the next person. You can help out the whole plane if you need to. So that is it. That's kind of the really good analogy too. Help yourself out first, fill your cup, and then the sky's the limit. Basically, you can live your best life doing what you aspire to do. And there is a self-compassionate test that you can take, and I'll send this out in the follow-up email. It's just a really quick assessment, and then there'll be a number that follows, and it'll explain that number, like where you fall in that number, and then underneath will be some other examples that you can do to become more self-compassionate. So it's a really good assessment. Okay, so like I had mentioned before, self-compassion is simply compassion directed inwards. And there's three main elements to that. There's kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And we kind of talked a little bit about this when we talked about Stress 101. But we're going to kind of delve into it deeper as it relates to self-compassion. So the first one is that self-kindness. And so being warm and understanding toward ourselves when something happens, when we fail or feel inadequate. And so we're really looking at it we're our own worst critic. So when you wrote down or thought about that critical statement, rather than right away going to that critical statement, what else can you do? Oftentimes we see failures as something bad, but how else could we look at it? Sometimes we could look at it and say, oh, that's one that didn't work, so that's one less way to try next time. And our you know Most of the time as humans, we feel very inadequate as a human. So when we can change that self-criticism and that critical statement and say, you know what, I'm learning, I'm trying to figure this out. Um, Always tell yourself the truth around that critical statement. And so with self-kindness, we soothe and nurture ourselves when confronting our pain, rather than getting angry with things that are happening in our life, those stressful moments, those failures, those things that we think should happen and don't. So confronting our pain can be really, really tough, but to feel it is to heal it, and to name it is to tame it. So when we're feeling our feelings, we can really heal them. And when we're putting a word to that feeling, like I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling mad, that really helps us decrease that stress around it. Because once we name it, then we can do something about it. We can kind of change that, and it's okay to sit in that pain. It's okay to sit in the mud with that. So when we clearly acknowledge our problems and shortcomings without judgment, we can do what we need to do to help ourselves. So I'm feeling sad, and it doesn't feel very good. Then we can kind of take that next step. And so that's where that common humanity comes from. We oftentimes feel like we're so alone, but being human equals being imperfect. And know that you're not alone in your suffering. Suffering is part of being human. So we're not alone in our imperfection. And really, if everyone was walking around perfect, oh, how boring would that be? So we want to appreciate our imperfections and really go with them and learn from them, and that can really help us live our best life. And we're part of the human race, and we're not alone. So failure and imperfection are very normal. We just want to keep going and keep taking off those masks. Okay, so the next one is mindfulness. We talked a little bit about this. So the definition is just awareness, like being in the moment. So oftentimes what happens is we kind of get on this cycle of life where we just go throughout our day and we're doing, and then we just oftentimes don't even realize the subconscious level of these self-critical thoughts that are coming in. And when we don't notice them, and it can actually change the vibration of every single cell in our body, and even cause more stress. So when we stop and notice our thoughts, being very mindful of thoughts, and we're just noticing them, we can bring attention and say, oh, whatever that critical statement that you wrote down or thought about it, when we notice it and say, like, for instance, if you're saying, I'm not good enough, or I'm so stupid, or anything like that, bringing and saying, I'm having thoughts that I'm not good enough, or, oh, I'm calling myself stupid again. And okay, well, then we can kind of dissect those thoughts and bring it to light. So you can ask yourself some questions. Well, is this thought being helpful for me, or is it causing more stress? Is it true? Am I good enough? And where does that thought come from? Did somebody else tell you that at one time? I know I work with a lot of wellness coaches around this, because they'll say one thing, like maybe that somebody else told them a long time ago, and then that thought kind of keeps replaying, and then now that thought becomes theirs. And then on the flip side, they'll say, but I also do this, and I do this and I do this. And then I'll stop them and say, okay, wait a minute. So it sounds like you're kind of conflicted between this thought and what you actually do and who you are. So which one is true? Which one is true? And then we'll talk through that. And you can do that for yourself to kind of reflect on it and talk through that and say, which one is true? And then so once you get to the truth, then every single time one of these self-critical thoughts comes in, you can always tell yourself the truth, right? All the time. If that can be really tough for us, because we sometimes are used to being so critical to ourselves, but noticing that thought, bringing that attention, and kind of talking yourself through is so very powerful. If you still have a hard time, looking at what is one thought that you can say once you notice that thought, that kind of that negative thought, what is another thought that you can say over and over again, maybe 3 times? Because we know for every one negative thought or any one negative thing that happens or that you're told, you need 3 positives to counterbalance that one negative. So counterbalancing your own negative thought with 3 positive thoughts, very powerful. Okay, so let's get back to mindfulness. So really involves turning toward our pain, thoughts, emotions, seeing them as they are without judgment. And so oftentimes as humans, especially in America, what happens is we don't want to feel anything. We don't want to have negative thoughts or feel emotions. We just want to push them away, or we want to numb them, or we want to hold on to something, or just avoid them, or not even think about it. Like, I'm just pushing it away. And you know what? If we don't sit in that moment of a thought, emotion, pain, nothing's going to happen. It's going to affect us. It's going to cause more stress, and it's going to harm our bodies, and we're going to have a lot of cortisol, that stress hormone, surging through our body. So we need to really reflect on that and think about what we're doing. Are we trying to numb it? Are we trying to take medicine or drink alcohol or sleep away the day? Or how are you reacting? Sometimes those things can be very negative, and they're not oftentimes helping. So recognizing what we're feeling, acknowledging the pain. Where do we feel it in the body? So if like I had mentioned before, if you're feeling sad or mad, like really feeling it, giving yourself a time to name it and say, you know what, I'm really stressed. I'm stressed because this happened. Where do you feel it in the body? Just acknowledging it. And then responding with the knowledge and self-compassion, bringing that common humanity. Like if I feel it in my head, I have a headache, or if my shoulders are really tight, or I feel it in my heart, just sit in that pain and say, ouch, this hurts. And then know that you're not alone. Bringing in that common humanity is so important. Of course, anyone going through this would feel the same way. That can be very powerful. and then reacting with that kindness toward that self-care. So, this is really hard, and this is tough, and I'm sad, and it hurts. What I need in this moment is, fill in the blank. So our stress reaction, remember, is very fundamentally good. It's your body trying to tell you something about your values, about kind of that next step of self-care, about self-compassion. So we don't listen. We don't listen to our bodies. We just tend to go and do what we need to do and get through the day. And that kind of just leads to more and more stress. So just really taking that time to listen. Okay. So self-compassion really helps facilitate our resilience, and it helps us react differently to any negative situation in a very, very healing way. So if something happens, we're able to take those steps, like I had just mentioned, to deal and to react to a situation. Self-compassion then leads to self-care, of course, because we're allowing ourselves and we're giving ourselves that space to change that critical statement, to find the truth in that critical statement, change it to the truth, to heal, to feel what we're feeling, and to name that feeling, and to care for ourselves. And then self-care leads to that strong, sincere, healthy boundaries that we can uphold and we can be proud of, and that can ultimately help us open up the communication lines with others, and because ultimately we really teach others how to treat us. And so if we are accepting a negative treatment from someone else, um, then how do they know how do they know to change it? So, and sometimes people won't change, and so that can be another boundary to set for yourself for your own health. Okay, so um, self-compassion and self-care, so definitely leads us to being less afraid of failure, right? And more likely to learn from these failures, like I had mentioned before, and mistakes. It can also help us learn from mistakes and really gain that willingness to keep trying something new. So oftentimes we'll use thinking of inventing the light bulb. How many trials did it take to actually invent the light bulb? Hundreds of failures that have happened, and so every single time um, that light bulb didn't work, then that was one less thing to try. So then, okay, try something else, keep on going. So willingness to keep going, and that resiliency to try something new. So being less afraid of failure. It's okay to fail because you're trying. And then we can also learn a lot about ourselves in that failure. And then it also leads to more empathetic concern, perspective taking, and forgiveness of others, especially that perspective. I was watching a little part of a Ken Burns documentary on baseball. And in like the 1940s, there was a guy who didn't have an arm, but he was one of the best batters in Major League Baseball. And I just got this aha moment of perspective to say, I have two arms, and what can I do? What can I do? That, I mean, he's out there batting and hitting these home runs, and so it was kind of a reminder to put all that into perspective of what can I do, and what am I not doing that I want to do. So definitely helps you be more empathetic for yourself, but then also empathetic for others, because everyone makes mistakes, and and when we look at our own failures and our own mistakes and say, oh, I'm learning more about myself, then we're more apt to forgive others for making mistakes because they're learning about themselves as well. So we want to make mistakes because that's how we learn. Okay, and then we want to value your time and values. So we want to value our values and value our time. So I want you to really think about that critical statement that that you had made, and think of it in terms of how much time does it take out of your day, um, and what it does to our bodies. So I really like this statement. It says, there is not time for even 1 second of your day to spend on thinking that you're not good enough or not worthy enough, right? I mean, there's really no time. What else can you do with that second um, of your day? There's so much other things. So that's why the healing of that critical thought and changing that critical thought to a very positive one um, can be so very powerful, because this moment is the only one you have, and if that moment is spent thinking not such good thoughts, then that can be really hard. So we're looking at living our best life, and reflecting on this is so very powerful. Okay, so I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship. So that's another really good one about making mistakes with the storms of life, and not being afraid of those, because once they come up and once we have that really good self-care and self-compassion, we can change those storms and those mistakes and those failures into something really, really positive, and not only help ourselves, but help people around us. And then Michelle Obama said, find your flame and keep it lit, right? So that's kind of what we talked about, of kind of figuring out what those passions are and finding them, and actually giving yourself the opportunity to do those things. And then you're finding your people, and you're finding those connections, and you're living your best life. Okay, so we are going to do a self-compassion exercise right now. So what I want you to do is put your feet flat on the floor, taking in a deep breath. And as you take in a deep breath, bring your shoulders up. And then as you exhale, shoulders come back and down. Good. And rest your hands wherever you're comfortable. Put your chin back just a little bit. A nice posture. Not too stiff, just good posture. You're not a wooden soldier. Just kind of sit on your chair. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or just imagine that maybe you're in this woods hiking. And as you are breathing in and out, just feel the oxygen coming into your body and giving you the energy it needs. And then as you exhale, just exhale any negativity that you have, and just breathe. Now I want you to think of a time in the not so near past, or in the near past, I should say, that you've taken care of someone, maybe someone that you really love, and just kind of get back into kind of that feeling of what that was like. Maybe it was hard. Maybe you were just happy to be there. Now imagine on your next deep breath that you're breathing in this golden light. And that golden light is very, very healing. And now as you exhale, just imagine that golden light now just spreads across that person that you're looking after, that you're caring for. And that golden light is helping them heal. And just keep breathing in that way. Golden healing light for you as you inhale, and a golden healing light for them as you exhale. Now our breath is with us all the time. We can use this anytime we need this. Sometimes when you're in a really hard situation, you could maybe say 3 breaths for me and 1 breath for you. Or maybe 10 breaths for me if you need a lot of healing and a lot of self-care and a lot of self-compassion. And maybe 3 breaths for you. So you can change that ratio whenever you need to. Just allow yourself to feel that healing breath come in, that self-compassion, that empathy, that patience, and then exhale fully. And remember, as you're exhaling, that exhale is that healing light for other. You can use this anytime, any place that you need it, for anyone else and also for yourself. Let's take one more deep breath in, healing light. Bring that breath all the way to your toes. And exhale fully, healing light for other. Take 2 more deep breaths in and out. And on your last exhale, go ahead and wiggle your fingers and your toes, open your eyes if they're closed, and bring yourself back to the room. Good. Okay, so some other thoughts here. We mirror what we think. So if we're thinking, uh, I'm not good enough, or whatever those thoughts are, you will mirror that out into the world too. So once we start to kind of change those critical thoughts, we will start mirroring those positive thoughts outwards. And so if you judge others, you are more likely to think others judge you. And this is so very psychologically true. So kind of catching yourself. When you see someone, and oftentimes we judge others on aspects of our own life that we're judging about ourselves. And so we start judging other people. And then when it's so close to the surface on your mind of these negative things about yourself, then you think other people notice them too. And 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 so if you notice, if you feel bad about like your nose, you'll tend to notice other people's noses, and if they look at you, oftentimes you'll think, oh, they're looking at my nose, because that's right on that surface. So kind of reflecting on that. And so the next one is to take care of others. You need to take care of yourself first. You can't give from an empty cup, and it really goes back to that awareness of thoughts and feelings and emotions, and healing them as they come up, feeling them, allowing yourself to be in that moment. And then this is a big one. Social media really makes it harder to allow space for self-compassion. It's easy to scroll through and look at somebody's perfect life and compare your own life with theirs. But just know that that people don't post the failures. They don't post the mistakes. They don't post the icky stuff in their life. So um, social media is not, it's not real. It's only a snippet or the good things that are happening. So um, turn it off, get away from it, and know that it's not real. There's no reason to compare your life with someone else's, especially when they're only showing you the best of the best. Okay, so as we were talking, when we kind of take the time to have that awareness and to understand our values and our stressors and how they affect us, that inner wisdom can be experienced by that mindful of our thoughts, values, feelings, or words. We can heal and bring that out and really have this inner wisdom that can lead us on to living our best life. So we can assess this wisdom to be on our own wellness journey by being aware of what will work for us and what won't work for us through self-care, right? That's just that kind of that next step. So self-compassion equals healthy choices, and then equals living our best life. It all works together.